My name is Shawn Daley, the creator of ILLÜMON, 7 Rays of the Sun, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Shawn Daley about ILLÜMON, 7 Rays of the Sun, Book 1. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. If you want to help the site and the podcast, please consider supporting the effort by chipping in at ko-fi.com/TrueNorthCountryComics. Your patronage is greatly appreciated. Shawn is a Ringo Award-nominated artist of Samurai Grandpa, with works including Terraquill, Ogre, Better Place, Shriner's War, The Bridge Builder's Creed, and other books. Shawn is also a chiptunist for video games. His newest project on Kickstarter is ILLÜMON, 7 Rays of the Sun, Book 1. ILLÜMON, 7 Rays of the Sun, Book 1 tells a story about having to rescue 7 fabled monsters. A brash young monster catcher braves a dying world to confront their captor, her very own sister. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Shawn Daley about ILLÜMON, 7 Rays of the Sun, Book 1. So, Shawn Daley, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Yeah, thanks, Shawn. Anytime.
Appreciate
it's always fun to chat.
Absolutely. And I apologize. Sir said right off the bat, Happy New Year to you. We're in a brand new year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you as well. It's
amazing.
Exciting. Yeah.
Yes, lots of good things are happening. But before we get to all the questions and all the exciting stuff you've got going on, I want to ask you, what's on your bedside reading table? What are you reading today?
So I'm reading Monster by Naoki Urasawa right now. Amazing manga artist and just one of the best cartoonists of all time, if you ask me. It's just the first volume of the book. I've got Bad Girls by Alex de Campi and Victor Santos. I've got The Motherless Oven by Rob Davis. And then a wrestler's autobiography, a wrestler named John Moxley released. Really interesting tell-all. And I'm sure most wrestling fans who are aware of the dude have seen the book if they're fans, but it's very cool. So it's kind of like a bit of a mix of comics, some nonfiction, just, a little bit of everything.
I applaud you. You find time to do the reading, because I've got a amount of books I still can't get around to. So,
no, I'm the same way. This is a very small sample of the reading table right now, but I feel like if somebody is making comics, it's really important for them to also be reading them as well.
Yep.
I don't know.
I agree.
If you could, actually sit down and make them without studying them, kind of, and keeping up to date with what's new and learning from the pros who have been releasing books forever. So always important.
It's a tough battle, but I understand and I applaud you on doing that. So for sure. So let's get to talking about your brand new Kickstarter called ILLÜMON, 7 Rays of the Sun, Book 1. That's our conversation for tonight. Wonder if you could talk a wee bit about the book and maybe what inspired you to create it.
Yeah. So I'm a huge video game fan, and I grew up loving Pokemon, especially when I was young, but that just never changed. And not just Pokemon, but all kinds of different monster catching and monster hunting games. I've grown up with them. I love them. I still play them all to this day. But I always found that, as I grew, the games kind of didn't, and they stayed for kids, which is fine because that's, their primary audience. That's what sells. But I'd always wanted stories set in worlds like that, but kind of for older readers, or at least, people who wanted a bit more from stories as far as more, I don't want to say adult, because it's not just for adults. Like, this is a book that I think anybody can pick up and enjoy, but it's probably better off for young adult readers up to, adults and just people my age. But it's a book that is kind of based off of those worlds, just telling a story that I want to tell. And it's something that I've been working on for not a very long time, to be honest. I think I had the idea in it would have been June 2022. And then within 3 months, I was just like, all right, I'm having too much fun coming up with all these ideas and writing everything. So it's time to sit down and try to draw it. And then as soon as I got into it, I just realized that this is a world I could tell multiple stories in. So I figured I would sit down, I would write the first book, and now here we are with the Kickstarter to see if the whole thing will come together.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I'm into my local comic shop every now and then, and I'm just amazed how Pokemon is still grabbing interested people from, all sorts of ages. So I think you definitely latched on to something there. And if it's something that interests you too, hey, even better. So that's cool.
Big time. Yeah. I mean, you always got to, work on it / write the things that you know, and not just the things that you know, like obviously you have to branch out, but it always helps when you are passionate about the things that you're working on. For so long now, I've always wanted a monster catching story in a monster catching world, but for, older fans, I guess, who don't just want stories for children, and I think that's important.
Absolutely. I should ask you, is this book singular creation, or do you have any other people helping you with it?
This one is just me. Which is, it's, I've got a few more collabs on the way later this year. But for this book, it was something that I kind of knew exactly what I wanted to see. And I knew exactly what I wanted it to be about and what the story was going to be and the tone of the book and everything. So I figured I would just do it myself.
Yeah.
But, to me, it's also just good practice because I'm self-publishing this. It's not going to a publisher. I'm sourcing the printer myself. I'm kind of taking care of every step along the way. And I just think as an independent creator, all of that stuff is really important to at least understand how it's done. You don't always have to do it yourself. And I mean, half of the fun of comics is the collaborative effort between a number of different creators. But I think it's just a good idea to understand how all of the different processes are done. Everything from the writing to the rudimentary level art, at least art theory. And then even stuff like, the lettering and the formatting for the printer and sourcing all of this stuff. It's all just, I don't know. I could go on and on about how important all that stuff is.
Sure. No, that's important. Well, what sort of art style or tools are you using specifically for this series?
This is all done in traditional media. It's all watercolor and ink. With kind of the general tools that I use, which is watercolor paper, some speedball ink, some Winsor Newton artist watercolor sable brushes, and a whole bunch of different types of paints. I've never sat down and written and drawn a book that was printed in color. I do have colored books out there, but they were done with other writers through other publishers and whatnot. Guys like Bob Sally and Easton DeVerna and just these amazing collaborators. But I've never sat down and just drawn and painted my own book. And that was mostly because printing is expensive, you know what I mean? Like black and white is probably my favorite, palette to work in. But I also love it because it's very affordable to print. But something like working in color, it's a little bit more time consuming and expensive to print, but there's nothing like it, It's it's just so much fun working with color. Like to do a little bit more often, as long as it's affordable.
Right. Now, once you get through that process, do you digitize and then do any touch-ups after that, or is that pretty much it?
Yeah, I'll definitely, after I scan everything in, I might open up Photoshop and do some, color swapping or some level adjustments and, change saturation or add lighting effects. But if I do stuff like that, it's very light touch-ups.
Right.
Just to kind of represent the physical page properly in the printed book. And because I generally like to sell all of my artwork once the pages are done, it's always nice when somebody sees a page that they like and they say, oh, I would love that on my wall. And then they look at the original and it looks exactly the same.
Right.
So, it's kind of important for me. But
absolutely to have physical media is certainly important, especially as in this digital age. But that's another question I have for you. As you mentioned off the top, we've got too many books to read, physical books. A lot of people have been using digital as a means of trying to cut back and save bookshelf space. With that in mind, however, are you or have you considered both the physical and digital media as two different things when you're doing creation, like in terms of page turns or panel swipes or that sort of thing? Does that impact at all in your creation process?
So for me, it hasn't, just because everything that I do, I plan on printing it. So when I'm writing and drawing it, I do need to make sure that, you know, the page turns are happening and the reveals are, you know, generally on the left side of a 2-page spread kind of thing. I guess things that you don't need to consider when you're working digitally. But to be honest, it's not something I ever really have, just because I've never jumped into that side of publishing comics only digitally, which, to be honest, I have no problem with. I think that any way that you're publishing comics is a good way to publish them. Have you noticed more like digital only stuff coming out from creators?
Yeah, there is that. In fact, there's a few services that have popped up. I have some interviews with some different organizations that are digital only, competing with Comixology. And as we focused, and as you may know, paper shortages are still going on. So the digital, method is an easy way for creators to get their work out and get them into many people's hands, but to the detriment of not having the physical art there, as you say, that people want to hold on to. So that's the catch-22 of that whole digital business. But
Sure.
I think, and I think a lot of people still appreciate having a book to hold. When you go to a show and you plop down your money and you take away a nice physical book, there's a appreciation there to say, hey, I've got something here, right?
Big time, yeah. I mean, there's nothing to me as, I guess, as aesthetically pleasing as just a bookshelf filled with awesome, perfect bound / hardcover comics. It's just a wonderful thing to see, and something that's just nice to have on display. I was actually thinking about doing this ILLÜMON story as single issues, like 24 roughly to 30-page single issues, but like I still love seeing. I still go to the comic shop every Wednesday and love picking up new floppies. But I really wanted something with a spine for that reason, something that you could actually put onto a bookshelf. And I hope that never goes away. Like
I hope so too. Well, yeah. I hope so. Well, let's cross our fingers. Now, getting back onto the topic of Kickstarter, which is starting today, got the Kickstarter running. I wonder if you could talk a wee bit about the incentives you have for those who back your project.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, I'm super pumped about being able to kickstart this, because there are incentives that I really wanted to do that for this book, and some rewards and stuff that just wouldn't have happened if it was done to a publisher. So I'm really excited to be self-publishing this book. But some of the rewards include trading cards, maps. Actually, every single reward tier also includes a soundtrack that comes along with the book. I've also written and recorded that. The whole thing is done in like chiptune, like old style video game music, which is something I've wanted to do for a long time, like a companion soundtrack for a book. And that it's in like retro gaming music style is just even better. So yeah, along with kind of the basic stuff like cards and maps, there's original artwork, there's full commissions, there's going to be one-of-a-kind pages from the book. And there's even a tier. There's only, I believe it's going to be just one copy of this, but there's one tier that is my entire sketchbook that I used to create the story, including all of the character designs, all the character notes. It's just kind of this one-of-a-kind item that hopefully somebody will end up with, because it's just kind of sitting here, not really doing much right now. But yeah, there's actually a lot more original artwork as rewards than any other campaign that I've run. If anybody is looking for original artwork, this is probably a good place to scoop some up along with the book.
Yeah, you're hitting all the sweet spots there. When you start talking about trading cards and music as well, man, that's pretty much heaven there.
I love it. I love it. It's not something, like I said, I would be able to do if I went with the publisher. I could, but this just makes so much more sense. So I'm super pumped up about it. But I mean, you can't really do a comic inspired by Pokemon and not have trading cards.
Oh, yeah.
As an option.
For sure. Yeah. Now, this is book number 1, so I presume you've got more lined up down the road, and you've got other projects too. I wonder if there's other things that you can talk about that are coming up for you in this brand new year of 2023.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so first, this Kickstarter's for the first book, but there's 2 more on the way. They're already written. I'm just waiting for this campaign to wrap up before I start working on the next one, which is probably going to be a 2023 Kickstarter later at the end of the year, if not a little bit sooner. But as soon as I'm wrapped up this, while I'm kind of working on that next book, I'll also be working on Samurai Grandpa 2 with Easton. which is like something we've wanted to do since we released the first one back in 2017. That might have been 2018. I can't remember. It's all a blur. The last yeah, there's more Samurai Grandpa on the way. And, you know, in 2023, one of my goals was to focus more on creator-owned stuff and less on, you know, published, or less on, you know, projects working just with a publisher. Just because the people that I'm working with all have these amazing ideas that I really want to see happen. So there's probably a few more Kickstarters in the future. But I'm also working with Dwayne Murray, the writer on Better Place, on a brand new illustrated kids book that we've been putting together. That's in a style I've never worked in before. It was kind of purely developed just so that we could work together on this one book. So it should be interesting to see it all come together. It's done without ink, which is kind of, you know, that is the way that I draw, is usually always with ink. This is without ink. It's just pencil, crayon, and watercolor paint. So it's just a very different style for me to work in. So I'm really excited to get that out there a little bit. So yeah, there's a little bit of a lot, you know, coming out in 2023.
Sounds good. Sounds like you're going to be busy. And I know that I saw you at Fan Expo this past year, and I know that you're trying to get out a bit more. I presume you're going to take your books out on the road and hit a few more shows as the year rolls along?
Yeah, that's the plan, is just to get out. I'm a bit more comfortable doing shows now these days. So just, you know, obviously it's been very hard to do shows over the last 2.5 years or so. And it's just really nice to be able to get back out and see everybody at these shows, especially this, like, I find that the smaller ones are actually the most fun, where you can actually like walk around and, you know, talk to all the people who are just alongside you making comics. And those shows are awesome. A lot of like small independent at comic shops and stuff like that. So yeah, that is the plan though.
Good. Good. So with all that you've got on the go, which is a lot, I'm wondering where you recommend that people go online to find out about your current and your future projects.
So the usual is Twitter, which hopefully it's still around. It's usually Twitter at Shawn Daley, all one word. I've joined some of the newer social networks like Mastodon and Hive, which seem to be fine when they work. Can search my name, and if they're working, I'm on there. I have a website, ShawnDaley.ca. I use Instagram at Shawn_Daley. And that's mostly it. I do have a Patreon account now that I'm putting out exclusive content for, and there's actually a commissions tier on that as well. If anybody is interested in getting a commission, there's an option for that on Patreon, and that is mostly it. It's mostly where I'm posting these days.
Thanks to Shawn for the chat. You can discover more about Shawn on Tumblr at Shawn-Daley and online at ShawnDaley.ca. And you can discover more about ILLÜMON 7 Rays of the Sun Book 1 on Kickstarter. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Please check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Tumblr at True North Country Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel and hit the notification button. Please send all feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. And if you want to help the site and the podcast, please consider supporting the effort by chipping in at ko-fi.com/True North Country Comics. Your patronage is greatly appreciated. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2023.